Join our knowledgeable hosts as they dive into the captivating universe of comic books, movies, TV shows, and pop culture. Get ready for vibrant discussions and a shared enthusiasm for all things superhero and beyond. A comic podcast straight from the panels. This is Beyond the Capes.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Cape podcast. With us today is Kevin Shinick. If you are like myself, you might have seen him in the show trying to stop the infamous Carmen Sandiego, to his work on Robot Chicken, and so much more. We are also here to talk about the new book on the horizon, Host Mortem. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
All right. As we like to ask every creator when they come on, and you are probably going to have a long answer, of all the things you could have ended up doing in this world, and there are a lot of options.
Yes.
Why did you join the rest of us and these fans in this specific kind of genre of this culture that we've kind of made, this geek nerd culture of just so much fun stuff?
You know, I was one of the lucky ones. I was one of the lucky ones in the sense that I arrived on this earth knowing what I wanted to do. Now, there was a giant scope attached to that. You know, when I was younger, I knew I wanted to be an actor, and that was all I focused on. But I also loved comic books. I loved cartoons. I loved movies. I loved all sorts of stuff. So I was shooting for acting. And then my acting took off a bit, but then, you know, your interests also grow. And even as a young kid, I was influenced by like Lucas and Spielberg and all those guys because I'm a child of the 80s. And so I would read up on them and go to their movies. And I knew acting was my first love, but I knew it was going to encompass all sorts of things because as we all do, no one likes just one thing really. Yeah. And so, So yeah, I think it took like in stages. Like I focused a lot on acting. Always read comics. Always read comic books. Which is so funny now. I was thinking of it earlier today. How it is so mainstream now, but growing up, it was not mainstream, and it seems so difficult to wrap your mind around if you're someone who's younger, who's like, "What do you mean it wasn't mainstream? Why wouldn't it be mainstream? It's got everything everybody loves, you know." But it was not. And I grew up on Mad Magazine and Spiderman and Batman, all those things that I was lucky enough to, you know, work on later in life. Because I always joke that I turned my midlife crisis into a career, but essentially I've just kept the same interests all that time.
Exactly. And for everyone listening that doesn't remember, I think the most excited when you asked me what's my first superhero movie, I think I can only go back to when they did Spawn with Michael Jai White. That was
wow.
That was really the first one that I knew of.
That's so funny. Well, for me, it was the Christopher Reeve's Superman.
Yeah,
that I mean, just changed my life and changed my world, both as a filmmaker and as a comic book geek and as a human being. You know what's so weird? And I've said that I'll give a little shout out to a documentary I'm part of called Selling Superman. And Adam Schomer is the director. He's a buddy of mine, and it's about someone whose dad had like Asperger's, it was described at the time, and never let his son touch or talk about the dad's comic book collection. And then the dad dies, and you realize he's got like the #1 Superman. He's got multiple copies of things that are millions of dollars. And I was talking to him about it, and it was funny how Superman related so much, or I related so much to Superman, but in a weird way, I think because it was more accessible, I found myself becoming more like Clark Kent at school. You know, like I talk about being a geek back then just for reading comic books. I think I started carrying a briefcase in like 8th grade, you know, just because Clark Kent did that. And I think it was something about being the do-gooder and being associated any way I could. And since I couldn't fly, I thought, well, all right, I'll go the other route. I'll be the nice guy with the briefcase.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I think my career, when you finally find out, and every boy and girl that's grown up with comic books, you all know this, when your parents have that sit down, like, you know, it was cool when you were 5, but your time, your time now. Okay, you're not going to be Batman. You need to come to the real world. You're like, all right, fine. I mean, that's the only reason I I'm in medicine now and I work in surgery. Is how can I do the most amount of good?
Of course.
Within my means. I mean, I'm not gonna inherit 2.5 billion in Gotham City to protect.
I know, exactly. But that's all we all can do is do it within our means, and if that's holding a door for someone, that's your means. You know what I mean? It's just, especially in this day and age, I think it's good to be reminded of that it doesn't take a lot. But if we all do a little something, it goes a long way.
Exactly. Now with your career, you have, and we were talking a little bit about, you have a very impressive rap sheet.
Well, I mean, thank you.
We obviously know, like I said, Carmen Sandiego,
right.
You also did do theater work.
I did. I was a Broadway actor for a number of years. I did about a half a dozen Broadway plays.
You've written and worked in comic books besides Host Mortem. I know
absolutely, yeah.
Batman and quite a few other.
I started on my first comic was Batman, which was a dream come true, and then I think then I jumped over to Marvel, and my first graphic novel was Superior Carnage, which I had a great time doing. And then I forget in what order they came, but I had an amazing time, and I think it came out really well. Was Superior Spider-Man team up. I did like 4 issues of that, and which was great because that was part of the Dan Slott story, and it was concluding, and Dan was good enough to let me almost have like the emotional, catharsis scene. So I did a lot of that with Doc Ock and Spider-Man and all that. I've since gone on to do a Guardians of the Galaxy. I jumped on Flash for a while. So yeah, I've definitely did my time in the comic book world prior to Host Mortem.
And a little bit of novel work.
Yes, that's true. I in 2019 I did my first Star Wars novel called Star Wars Force Collector, if anybody happens to be on Amazon, which was also a dream come true. They had reached out to me, Lucasfilm had reached out to me to see if I wanted to do a Star Wars children's book. They had an idea for Chewie and the Porgs, which was connected to, The Force Awakens. And I said, yes, but I would love to be considered for more adult stuff or older stuff. And they were like, oh, yeah, we didn't know you were interested. To which I was like, who wouldn't be interested?
Show me one person.
Exactly. So they told me what they were looking for. And I realized now in hindsight what a rare opportunity it was, because I pitched them basically an original story with original characters in the Star Wars universe. But what was great about the story was, not to get too deep into it, but it was about a character who, when he touched certain objects, could see their past. And he didn't know why. And he didn't know why he got these headaches. And his grandmother's basically like, I think you have the Force. I just don't think you know what to do with it. And this is like, Rey's time around Force Awakens. Yeah. He's like, what's the Force? Who are the Jedi? So she tells him, there are no Jedi to teach you. But if you go out into the world and find objects that they touched, they will flash back and show you, and maybe that could be your tutorial. So if you know nothing about Star Wars, it's a great journey of discovery. And if you know everything about Star Wars, it's great because every time he touches an object, we flash back to one of the movies, one of the cartoons, one of the comic books, one of the novels, to pick up some things that may have been, dropped along the way as far as I could tell.
Yeah, that's amazing. Number one, shout out to Dan Slott, Superior Spider-Man, and all that. That was a comic book me and my other co-hosts talk about all the time, that we rank in our top 10. That got
juggernaut.
That got way too much hate.
Yeah, I know, right? I know. Everything does.
One of the few Spider-Man stories that really shook the foundation of Spider-Man. Until this day, I will die on that hill defending it as one of the best Spider-Man stories.
It's so true.
Now, what's really impressive is because you've had so many different mediums that you've done work in, did it help or did it get, was there any hindrance? Because you've seen kind of from conception to kind of finalization many times. And as you move down and you see it in so many different mediums, do you feel like making Host Mortem that, this is pretty easy because I've seen a play come together. I've seen a show come together. I've seen a book, a comic book.
Yes and no. There are so many different mediums, but I tell people all the time, especially if they're not in the know in our industry, that comics are deceptively difficult.
Yes.
Especially if you're doing them right. You know what I mean? To me, there's always like a formula, not a formula, that sounds formulaic, a puzzle or a challenge that I try and get out. I've talked about before, but it's like, I always try and approach any story with, I want to have something to say that's worth reading for at least 20 pages. You want to use as little dialogue as you can so you can give the artist something really wonderful to do. You want to, if you can, make every page a page turner. That's why they were called page turners, and finding all that and also keeping your audience really entertained and on their seat the entire time is deceptively difficult. And I am also turning Host Mortem into a straight up novel, like a different tale, but like a prequel almost. And it's a novel, and yet it's so much easier. You know what I mean? But the flip side of that is I get to work with some really amazing collaborators. Like Damian Torres is my main artist. Andrea Schiavone is another contributing artist. I've got Pippa Bolin as my colorist, and Taylor Esposito as my letterer. And we have Clover Press, who's going to distribute this. So all of us working together, it's so much fun because it's a dream come true. I get to craft this. I've always loved murder mysteries. So I thought, well, to do a murder mystery in a comic book form, and that's been done before too.
Yeah.
But I thought, what can I do that hasn't been done before? What can I say that's unique to me? Because in this day and age, you want to, break through the noise. And when I was sitting to try and create an original detective, I looked in the mirror, or at least in the reflection of my computer, and I was like, wait a minute. I used to play myself as a time-traveling detective on Where in Time is Carmen Sandiego. And my story, I knew was going to be a noir piece. And I thought Greg Lee, who was the host of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, played himself as a classic 1940s gumshoe detective. I thought, I have all I need right here.
Exactly.
And so in sort of a meta tongue-in-cheek way, I thought that'd be great, which is when I came up with the title Host Mortem, because I thought it summarizes everything I want it to be. It's tongue-in-cheek, it's a little goofy, it's fun, it suggests the murder mystery, it's suggesting game show hosting. So, we'll see how it goes.
Exactly. It sounds fantastic. And it's funny you say the novel, because we've had many independent artists that have, I've written books before. I used to be a screenwriter until I had to write my first comic book. And you don't realize how hard it is to tell the world's greatest story in 22 pages.
Absolutely.
About 5 panels per page.
It's so true. It's so true.
And how many characters you love to introduce. You would love to be like, oh, this enemy's secret origin flashback is so great, but I need to cut it because it just adds extra. It does not add to the story, and it kills you on the inside.
Well, look, even Host Mortem, at first my idea was, wouldn't it be great if I pulled in other hosts from the 90s? Because the 90s, for whatever reason, everybody loved a guy in a fedora. We had Blue's Clues, you had Figure It Out on Nickelodeon, you had Cluedo, you had Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, Where in Time is Carmen Sandiego. So I had this grandiose idea of then, just like you said, as the story is most important, I was like, you know what? There's enough story here without all those guys. So I possibly save them for another chapter.
Definitely. Now, obviously, you've written stuff before, so that this isn't like brand new to you. Does it feel any different though, considering now you're not taking like an initial IP or a character that's done and you are making an original?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the other thing about IP is, you do have to follow their rules. And I think the rule across comics, at least it has been for me, is do whatever you want with the character, just put them back the way you found them. You know what I mean? And some editors are a little more liberal than others, where I can't do that. But I've been fortunate to work with some really great editors who are like, oh, that's fair. You do that as long as you bring them back where you left them. So yeah, it's freeing and also scary too, because you're like, I got nothing to hide behind. This is me. This is my idea and when I'm putting it out there. But I can't help but look at it, and it's like, not that it took me so long to come up with this idea, but like once I did, I was like, wow, it really encapsulates everything I love. Movies, film noir, trivia, game shows, comics, you know what I mean? Artistry. And I thought, what a joy. So I'm just going with the flow and letting it carry me. And like I said, I love murder mysteries, so I'm well versed in murder mysteries. So I was like, and then that's all without adding the artists. And then all of a sudden I start adding the artists, and I'm like, wow, this stuff, again, if you're your audience knows comic books. So it's like, your hope when you get an artist is they're almost mind readers, because you tell them what you want and you expect what you want, but you also want them to plus it. You want them to think of things that they thought you would love but didn't think of. And that's what I've been given with Damien and with Andrea and everybody, because it's like, and even my covers, like we talked about Force Collector earlier. The artist who did my Star Wars cover was an artist named Tony Foti. So I love that cover so much. He did such a great job that when I had the idea for Host Mortem, before I had anybody, I called him and said, look, I'm trying to get an idea of a cover up there. Would you do it? And so again, I gave him some seeds. I told him what I was looking for. And he took the ingredients and baked them in his way and gave them back to me. And I was like, this is fantastic. This is great. So that's what you hope for. You hope to get what you want, but also better.
Exactly. I usually describe it as kind of building a house. You tell the contractors, like, I understand by code, I have to have 4 walls, a roof, and a
Yes.
door. How you put the layout, though, I don't care how the paint and the furniture goes. That's where the creative just happens.
That's well
You just
put.
need to- yeah.
Yeah. And I was given I'm in a position now where I don't have to listen to this note, but I remember, to be fair to artists, I got a great note from a Marvel editor when I was first starting out. It might have been that first graphic novel. And he said, as the writer, your job is to love everything the artist sends you, unless it interferes with your story.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's actually a great note, because it opens up interpretation.
Yeah.
And so I'm very specific in my scripts, but as I said, when you get it back, you're like, oh, it's not how I envisioned that, but that's really cool. So I'm going to go with this because it's also their book too.
Exactly. Now, some of the things that you described that you want to put into Host Mortem,
Yeah.
You could definitely see as qualities and characteristics of some of your shows, especially Robot Chicken was a really hard one for me as a fan growing up to lose it, because I think there's just so many good pop culture references, and obviously my parents being kids of the 70s and 80s as well, that was great for them watching it, because you did tackle a lot of questions that
we did.
A lot of people did have, and they just want to really see it animated.
I know. What I love about that show mostly is we would do a joke that we thought 5 people might get, but those 5 people would be like, oh my God, they're speaking directly to me.
Exactly. And it's crazy too, because when you guys did that show, I think a lot of people tried to bottle it and did try to emulate it. It was very popular because it was fun, I think, for everyone just to see this kind of what if, or they're referencing this small obscure character from Labyrinth that I love. And then it's weird because in a flash, as soon as you guys had finally said, we've had a good run, I think it's time we stopped the show, it went away. And
well, the funny thing is, it really didn't stop, to be honest. I mean, it was still going as of like a year ago, and I think they've shifted to just specials. You know what I mean? So it's still in the ether, but I know what you're saying, because there's a dearth. There's a dearth of it now. You know what I mean?
And it's interesting because as soon as that happened, it's like the whole thing went away. Do you think that's a show or something that could come back? Because the things that you guys tackled now, we've had such a gap. So many things have happened, and so many new things have come about that.
I think it could go on forever, but I thought my show Mad could go on forever too. But the politics of it becomes not with Robot Chicken as much, but with Mad. They basically told me, like, we're going to replace your it was the #1 show on Cartoon Network at the time, and they were like, but if we can replace it with a show that has more toys, we're going to. And that's what that demographic is nowadays, that they're long cartoons or long advertisements for toys. And it was tough because there are things that could be licensed, but they've already been licensed. So Alfred E. Newman, Spy vs. Spy, Don Martin, all those things were already out in the ether. So that's the only reason. But those, it could be like SNL, those topical sketches, and they'll never get old.
No. And it's crazy. And for anyone listening that's wondering, you can't tell me that happens. Look at Power Rangers. The first run of them lasted, I think, 3 seasons. And once they sold out toys, then we kept on getting a new season after. And they said, oh my God, this is a gold mine, kids. And that is why we had so many toys growing up.
It's so true. That's what keeps Warner Brothers alive, is Batman, Tom and Jerry, and Scooby-Doo.
Which is really funny too, because when I go to my local LCS, I've been rebuying the Batman the Animated Series action figures, and I said, where were these when
I
was growing up? Why are we just getting these now?
It's so true, but because the reason they're showing up now is because people who are our age, who love them, desperately wanted them, and when they became adults, they're now making them. You know what I mean? But it's not something they thought of ahead of time.
I do. The amount of rebuying childhood
Yes,
favorites is starting to become.
I'm sure. I can only
tedious.
imagine.
I think I just bought the Voltron lion for anyone that's looking. Target,
Wow.
all 5 lions combined. It's amazing. Highly recommend.
That's so funny. That's so funny. It's so funny you said that because just today popped up a video on one of my feeds about one of the Voltron sketches we did for Mad, which was the 9 Voltron battery, which always makes me laugh. So you can look for that sometime.
Yes, so many good memories. Which I mean brings us to the whole reason that we're here, and this is for Host Mortem, coming out. Working with Clover Press.
Correct.
So for everyone listening that wants to know, what is Host Mortem about?
Host Mortem, having just described my background, Host Mortem is a story of what happens when 2 fake detective game show hosts from the 1990s have to solve a series of real murders in the 1940s. And it begs the question, are hosts really smart, or do they just have the answers? And so it kind of becomes, it's an older reference, but I love the movie The In-Laws, which is kind of like an Odd Couple version of, 2 guys trying to solve a mystery. And so it's like taking that idea where Greg Lee and I, playing ourselves, go through a time portal at Comic-Con that we find and wind up in the 1940s, 1947 to be exact. And what I love about the story is it involves, the murder involves the making of the film noir classic, The Big Sleep, starring Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. Now, my take on this whole thing is, again, are hosts smarter, or do we just have the knowledge of the answers in front of us and time? Meaning, one of the things I found so interesting in doing a deep dive on The Big Sleep, again, because I'm a history buff and a film buff, is that The Big Sleep came out, and everybody knows it came out in 1946. It's a classic. But few people at the time, up until the 90s when they found it, didn't realize that the movie was actually completed in 1945 and distributed only to like a couple of army barracks during World War II as like a test audience. And they decided they needed more scenes of Bogart and Bacall, so they went and recut it. But in that process, they also recast a role or two. And so my murder mystery takes a look at a what if of like, what if the person who plays that role currently was murdered? Would the world know there was another person who played that role earlier? Was there, things like that. Now, again, if you're a fan of The Big Sleep, maybe you know that now, but you didn't before 1998, I think, when they found the footage. So it's just a question of, we're not really smart. We just have more information in our hands because we're from the 21st century, but it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek look at that. Solving mysteries in 1947. We really embrace the noir of it all. We embrace the tongue-in-cheek of like, we don't really know what we're doing. We played fake detectives for so long, but now we got to put our money where our mouth is. Because even today in real life, I say to people like, I've got so many random facts in my head that it's like, I'd love to put them to use in some way other than, hey, did you know the singular of spaghetti is spaghetto? You know what I mean? It's like, what else can I do with we talked earlier in the cast about doing good. What can I do with this information that would actually serve a purpose?
Exactly. And again, growing up in that time frame, I mean, Snapple used to have a random fact under every cap. So
yes, they did.
It was a big thing about knowing random facts. Even now, to this day, I have very obscure trivia stuck in my head thanks to my father.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You know what?
Had a statue of Humphrey Bogart growing up as a kid.
Did he really?
That's how I know who he is.
That's so funny. That's so funny. You don't remember, do you? Because I found a bit of trivia today. Do you guys remember the commercial? It was the first Got Milk commercial, and it was a kid who was eating like cookies and peanut butter, and you could see he was in a room filled with he was obsessed with Aaron Burr, and he's listening to a radio station that says, for the trivia of the day, who shot Alexander Hamilton? And he knows the answer and he calls in, but he's got so much in his mouth that he's like, Aaron Burr, and they couldn't hear him. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
I just found out. You know who directed that? It was his first directorial thing. It was Michael Bay.
For some reason, it had to be Transformers.
That's so funny. That's so funny.
Yes. Well, that was a crazy campaign. Let alone,
I know it was. It was.
But again, campaign.
Bit of trivia. Yeah,
exactly.
For you.
Everyone, you're gonna thank us one day for this.
Exactly.
I assure you. Now, the crazy thing about murder mysteries, which is crazy too, because I think That's the one genre I could argue that has never ever gone away. We might have gotten a lot of remakes. We might have gotten some one season hits.
Yep.
But everyone loves it. I think it definitely had a resurgence thanks to
Ryan Johnson.
That for sure. I mean, Netflix, Murders in the Building.
Yeah, absolutely.
When doing a comic book graphic novel of this kind of magnitude, was it hard to know, like, I have a really good idea and a really good story. Let's do this one story. Or in your middle of writing, you're like, oh man, we're back in time. We see this accident and you're like, oh, this is a weird accident. I kind of know something about this in this time period. Just cap it. We're already on another mission here.
Absolutely.
Like, oh.
Well, you know what? I'll go back to the Star Wars novel for a moment. I, of course, am a Star Wars fanatic, and I work with George Lucas on a number of projects. One of them being the ill-fated Star Wars Detours, which was the animated series that got shelved after he sold the company. But I worked literally alongside of him, and I again, talk about random facts. I know so much Star Wars thing. In writing the book, the novel, you got to realize at some point as an author, who am I writing this for?
Yeah.
Because you don't want it to be such a deep dive that you're going to alienate your audience. You know what I mean? It's like there is so much information I know that I can put into this, but to whose end? Am I just showing off? And because it gets very cluttered. And so the same thing happens with Host Mortem. I'm trying to keep a clean line. I'm trying to keep some twists and turns, but you don't want to go. You want to go nuts because then you'll lose your audience. So I think personally, there's just enough of new material to intrigue people and a lot of, I don't want to say red herrings, but like you can see where things would go. And like I said, with bragging the other hosts in, I hope this is the first of many. So I thought, well, put that in the idea bag and we'll come back to it another time.
Exactly. Which was going to lead me to ask, I think a lot of times when you do these projects and these passion projects and you see the end result, it's always, when do I get to do the next one? Which obviously is always the hard part because you have to wait. You got to get the Kickstarter out. You got to see what the numbers look like. And usually, and I feel like Clover and these small independent publishers are so good because for them, Clover has done a great job with getting stories out there. I love absolutely. Clover. I love all the people we've had. Michael Schwartz, who's done Armored with Clover.
Yep.
Fantastic. So I mean, I definitely see this as, as them wanting to pick up because I feel personally like they like doing these long runs because we do want these stories. And you have set them up kind of for a care. I mean, there's so many films.
There's so much you can go. Exactly. There's so much you can do.
Is that something you would be interested in if the numbers did show that people do want to see where this, they want to see? Do they turn the true detectives?
And not only that, but like I said, when I came up with Host Mortem, all of a sudden I thought, wow, that could be a great title. This could have many legs. I want it to be a graphic novel. I want it to keep going as a graphic novel or other issues. As I said earlier, I think this would be a great straight novel.
Yeah.
From my point of view, another tale, like, and the other funny thing was, again, not putting one foot in front of the other. At first I thought, all right, I'll do this. Maybe I can promote it at Comic-Con. What would I do? I can get a panel. Who would I invite? Well, I happen to know as friends a lot of former hosts. And then it dawned on me, wait a minute. This is almost like shaping up to be like a fun live improv game show as well. Again, the question, are hosts smart or do they just have the answers to pit former hosts against audience members? So I've been working on a live version of this as well. Just kind of for a fun thing because all my friends who are former nostalgia hosts want in on this, and since I couldn't put them all in this first issue or this first graphic novel, I thought, why wait? Let's get them all on stage and do that. But to answer your question, yes, I'm constantly coming up with different storylines, and whether it's graphic novel or straight up novel, I really want to keep doing them because it brings me so much joy.
Definitely, and it's nice having so many friends in the business that have done the game shows because. If you were to ever bring in another guest, it's like, oh my God, they did a movie not too long ago. Legends of the Hidden Temple has so many storylines that have never been talked about.
I know. It's so true. It is so true. And like I said, everybody's game. Everybody's just looking to have fun, you know? And so when I called, now the funny thing is, My show is directly after Greg Lee's show ended, but we didn't meet each other for like 20 years. And then we had a mutual friend had a film appear at a film festival, and we both showed up to it. And we joked because they were like, "Oh my God, Kevin, Greg, meeting for the first time." And we hit it off famously, but then never spoke after that, even though we exchanged numbers. And so when I had this idea, I just called him up out of the blue and was like, "Greg, I've got this idea," and he listened to it and he was like, "I'm on board. I think this is fantastic." So we've become so close doing this now that he's like a brother. It's really fantastic. And so I feel like not only are we a great pair on the page, but we're a great pair in real life as well.
Awesome. Now, one of the challenges I always wonder when doing a story like this is, you're obviously putting a lot of yourself into the story as well,
Yes.
versus just having a character that you can kind of disassociate with.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
not you. Was there any challenges to essentially writing you for you?
Always, and that's I try and step out of it a little bit, even though it is me. No matter what project I'm working on, the first hat I put on is my fan hat, because I want to be entertained just like anybody else, and I don't want to be ahead of the story, and I don't want to, lose interest in the story. So I'm going into it thinking like, what do I want to see, and what are my expectations of Kevin Shinick? What, from my experience, what do people expect from me? And in some ways, it's good because then I can invert those expectations and maybe surprise them and do certain things that, oh, I didn't expect that from him. I try and keep, if you know me or if you know the show, we're funny guys or whatever, but put into the situation of having to solve a murder, we're both in over our heads. And I think that comes from a lot of the joy of it and the humor from it.
Definitely. And now, and humor is always one of the best things when you do a type of story like this. I
Yes.
always go back to David Avalone for Dynamite and his Elvira Meets series. That's always a favorite for me because he interjects a lot of facts, a lot of stuff. And when we've had him on the show and talked, it's great.
That's great.
Is it hard to balance it out though as well, because you want to have it fun with it? It's a fun story for you, but at the same time, obviously, we're dealing with murder. We're dealing with a real life event as well.
Yeah.
How do you find the balance between humor, enjoyment, and all this, and then these moments of seriousness?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
It's a great question. And what's funny is I've learned in real time doing, panels at Comic-Con. I'll be up there for Robot Chicken and I'm making everybody laugh and cracking my jokes, and it's going real well. Then I did a panel for comic books and I'm making my jokes, and I'm realizing people don't want jokes in that panel. They want to know about character and story. And so I've learned my lesson. I'm not saying I didn't go there, but there is a balance.
Yeah.
To me, the most important part of this whole graphic novel, which again is a 180-page graphic novel, is the mystery and the story and the plot. That to me is the most important. And that includes the characters. The humor is always going to come. That's what I do for a living. I'm a comedy writer. I can do that. So it's almost like sprinkling in, sprinkles or whatever you want afterwards. To me, if you can get a great story with great characters, people will follow you, and then you can add, and then they'll get extra bonus out of, oh my God, this is also funny, because you get their attention when you can make them laugh, but then they stick around when they realize they can trust you to, they know they're in good hands.
Exactly.
I went back. I'm just going to interject for a second. I went back and watched Spielberg's Young Sherlock Holmes the other day. Obviously not one of his greatest, but I will tell you, especially going back after seeing all the films that have come out between now and then with just in our culture, within the first 10 minutes, I'm in good hands. I'm with Spielberg. You know what I mean? And that's the kind of sense I want to give someone as soon as they pick up any of my comics. Within 2 pages, I want them to know, oh, I'm in good hands here. And so that was my hope for this.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's another weird one with Sherlock Holmes, our obsession, and then we fall out of love with him so quickly.
Yes.
Because Robert Downey Jr., that was a big one when he had picked it up and did the 2 movies, in which, again, there was a lot of ups and downs for it, depending on who you ask. But totally. I thought it was a very good, for the most part, very good adaptation. We bought.
I do too.
We bought one of his famous villains to life.
Yeah.
then that kind of died down. Then I remember we had a show called Elementary.
Yep.
What was it? Sandra Oh was in it, I believe, as Watson.
It was not Sandra Oh. It
Who
was
was it?
who was in Charlie's
Lucy,
Angels?
Lucy Liu. That's who
Lucy
it was.
Liu. Lucy
Man,
Liu.
Another one. I really love that show. I think I own the complete series. Very good. And it was weird because I was watching a commercial today. There's another Watson.
Yeah, there's a Watson.
coming
There's a
out
Watson out now.
because Randall Park is Moriarty.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, interesting. I was kind of surprised we're tackling Sherlock again, and we kind of go in this up and down pattern. I mean, we even had an animated show back in Fox Kids. It was Sherlock Holmes in the 21st century.
Yes. Well, as you said before, people love mysteries when they're done right, and it's kind of like James Bond. I know we're at a crossroads now, but it's because they'll never let this character go, nor should they. You know what I mean? And they just have to find the right take for this culture at the moment. And that's why you can keep reinventing Sherlock Holmes or Agatha Christie or Poirot or Columbo in a sense, because we all enjoy that. There's a certain, even like you said earlier, even though it's a murder, these murder mysteries are enjoyable. There's a little spark in there in the eye of not only the detective, but also the audience member. And that's what's fun about it. Every Agatha Christie you see, they're all a little heightened.
Yep.
Because they have to be in order to, and that's a great thing about noir. You look at Double Indemnity. I love that movie because the dialogue is to the point where it's almost ridiculous, but it works. They make it work so well that you can't help but smile and be like, oh my God, it's performance art in a sense. And it's a little beyond the word heightened. It's a little fantastical. And that's what I'm trying to capture. You know, when I look back at film noir, I think, what do I love about it? And I try to do a deep dive, and I thought, it's really a combination of a number of things. It's 1940s pulp books brought to life by, in a sense, 1930s German expressionism to look like a Caravaggio painting because of the use of light and stuff. It's the melding of three probably crazy ideas that shouldn't normally work, and yet it comes together perfectly. And that's why I thought Host Mortem was perfect, because it melds things that normally I don't think would work. If you said to me, I'm going to do a game show, murder mystery, but it's a comedy and it's these detectives and it goes back to the 1940s, I may be like, what? But because I see the vision in my head and I know it works, and now that Damien and Andrea and Pippa and Taylor have all made it come to life, I was right. I was like, wow, this is really working.
Definitely. Now with this story, obviously, if we do more stories or we have everything else, you can meet a lot more game show hosts, but you can also meet some of your fictional detectives.
Totally.
Do you have one in mind that you would like to work with the most? Dick Tracy is always one. I'm so glad his comic book has gone back out. I love the movie so much. But when I think there's so many, I mean, Batman, obviously, but even some more obscure ones, Rorschach from The Watchmen.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly. Well, you know what's so funny
many.
is I look at my career and I thought, wow, actually I've been inching towards Host Mortem my whole life. I wrote Batman, as we said, he's a detective.
Yep.
I wrote the movie Scooby-Doo and Kiss, and that's the original Mystery Machine, and I helped create the series Mike Tyson's Mysteries. So each time I'm inching closer to, I think, what was my inevitability, which is an adult tongue-in-cheek graphic novel, which again may become something else as well. But that's the trajectory I was on. So in terms of bringing other detectives or something, for right now, I'm leaning into the host of it all. So if it would be that, if Elvira didn't have her own comic once, I have her on. You know what I mean? She was a host, and I've learned too, like when I do the game show version, we're opening up to all sorts of hosts. So we have television hosts, we have podcast hosts, we have game show hosts, radio hosts. So look, Ryan, you might very well be on.
All right, possibility, everyone. Stay tuned.
It is. It's a possibility.
Awesome. Now, when doing the nice thing too is doing the Kickstarter for this,
right?
Because a lot of people just go straight to the publisher, which is fine.
Right.
Publisher does allow the advertisement. They go through an agency. I mean, you end up on a podcast like this, which is fine. But what I really like about Kickstarter is you then, especially with the backing of a publisher, Kickstarter is a great way to put so many add-ons when you can start doing those extras while you write the book and be like, all right, guys, if you really do like this, I can give this to you, but you got to help share. Was there any fun of doing a Kickstarter where they're like, hey, Kevin, this is the book, this is the main bread and butter, but we'll give you these 5 options. You can do this we meet this funding goal. We can do this.
Right. Absolutely. In fact, I've been having so much fun because, I've been a supporter of Kickstarter for a while. I have a lot of comics that I've bought off of Kickstarter or back them. And so I know that one of the reasons I went through Kickstarter is you are selling to a community, a creative community. And I wanted this to be a give and take. Yes, I'm giving them a book, but I don't want just a book in exchange for money. Yes, of course I want that. But the fun of it being like, what do I think this audience would appreciate? So I've tried to dig deep and figure out what can I offer? Just like I thought with the graphic novel, what's special to me?
Yeah.
I thought in addition to like original comic book art and like, getting yourself written into the book to be murdered off or whatever, I'm also offering things like, look, I do a lot of voiceovers in my career. Maybe I can help you. Let me, you on this certain tier, the reward would be I do a 3-minute narration on your animated project or your live action project, whatever it is. Dinner with Greg and I to talk about your plans and what dreams you want to do and how can we help you get closer to them. Greg and I we do Comic-Cons and things like that, and we get to meet our fans there. But, maybe you like a video from us. Maybe you want a Zoom lesson. We will, I'll critique your script. If you have a comic book, Damien's going to give a weigh in on those things too. So it's not just, hey, here's a shiny object for what we want to give you. I've tried to really think about this and say, what would this particular audience really appreciate? And I'm sure I've forgotten tons of them because I had a bunch of them, not to mention variant covers and, like I said, invites to the premiere launch party and all sorts of stuff. But that's been the fun of it. In fact, someone said to me, like, what if you just found the money to do this? Because as we know, graphic novels are not cheap.
No.
And then for a second, I was like, I would love to have someone back this whole thing, but I would still want to offer these things.
Exactly.
Because that's how you build a community. That's how you build a following. That's how you find the next book you're interested in by talking to people, So that's my hope. I hope we do very well on Kickstarter, but I have found great joy in trying to connect with people with these rewards.
Yeah, no, I think anytime you can give back to the community, and that is one of the things that makes 90s nostalgia, comic book, this culture, even now with it being new and we get new generations in, it still remains the same base of, you're looking for Superman. I had this Superman issue.
Yes.
Do you know what's crazy about this Superman issue? There's this one item here that was controversial from this one 1972 ad. Do you know about that? Watch the video.
Exactly. Look, the truth is the only reason I'm able to do, or I haven't had the idea to do Host Mortem, is because there's a fan base out there that still know who Greg and I are and who Carmen Sandiego is. And so those are the people that we're talking to. If you love comics, if you love movies or game shows, there's always a niche. And as I said to you before, what's so great about this is it brings things together that you wouldn't think would normally work, and yet we're all a community that have so much in common.
Exactly. And hopefully, we never know. Maybe Carmen can make an appearance, because I will say, without Carmen Sandiego, I feel like everyone's geography skills.
I know they really have. Well, they brought her back as a Netflix animated series, but they've made her a hero.
Yeah,
she's no longer the villain, which is funny to me. My daughter watches my show, which is funny to me because it still holds up because it's a history show. It doesn't get dated. What does get dated were our prizes. At the end, if you won this gigantic multimedia system, which you needed a U-Haul to get home, which I'm sure I can do everything on my iPhone that entire thing would be able to do. So it's funny to see how things change and how they stay the same.
Definitely on the prizes, because I think I was watching an old Nickelodeon documentary when they used to do all the prizes with my wife, and I said, remember how everyone wanted the see-through phone with the multicolored wheels and dials?
Yes,
because that was the best phone in the world to have.
It's so true. And now we don't even have phones.
Yeah.
I mean, we have our
dial-up.
Exactly. What are you talking about? But but that's the great thing. My whole career seems to be based on nostalgia. Because even Carmen Sandiego wasn't nostalgia, but it was all about history, which is a nostalgia in its own sense. So whether it was Robot Chicken or Mad or Scooby Doo or the Batman and Spider-Man series, the Spider-Man series I wrote, it's all in service to things we loved growing up. And I think we all need to stay in touch with the people we were when we loved them, because I think time was different and we were different. But wherever you can find joy, you should grab it. And I know a lot of us feel these things. That's why we're all listening to this podcast, because we have something in common.
Exactly. Which brings us to the whole point, again, that we're here. Host Mortem, what is the timeline looking for getting this out and getting into everyone's hands?
I say within a month. We don't have an exact date yet, but I will tell you this, because I'm learning as we go. The more followers we have on Kickstarter, the sooner we can launch and the better chances we have of success. You can find it on Kickstarter. You can also just go to hostmortem.com, and that has a link right to the Kickstarter. We're prepping for it. Like I said, the pages are coming in. They're looking gorgeous. The one thing I love about Clover Press is I feel when I created this idea in my head, it was more than just a book. It was like, or a comic book or a graphic novel. It was like a piece of art, and I kept thinking. And so when Clover approached me, I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what I wanted. We have this artist I found named Jesse Larson, who did an amazing cover that I'm going to use as a slip cover for one of the higher tiers. And it's just something that I want on in my library. You know what I mean? Story alone, I want it there, but I also want the look of it to match what they are. So yes, Kickstarter, hostmortem.com. I also have a free Substack that I do called Game Show Gumshoe, where I talk all about things, hosting, humor, homicide, whatever. But I give you updates on the Kickstarter there as well. You could also follow me at Kevin Shinick across all social media. And I just hope that if anything I'm saying here interested you in the least bit, go and follow us on Kickstarter, because then we'll be able to launch this even sooner and we'll get that book to you in your hands.
Definitely. Everyone listening, we will have all the links to there. So just click on them, follow, sign up, stay up to date, follow Clover, follow Kevin. You won't miss out on this.
Please do. Yeah.
Also, everything you just said, that's like the best book or podcast title: humor, hosting, and homicide.
It's so true.
That just writes itself.
I mean, that's what Host Mortem is. When people ask me that one day, I was just like, yeah, it's hosting, humor, and homicide. That's everything it is.
The 3 H's. Everyone needs it.
Everybody knows those 3 H's.
Perfect. So we will have that linked up. Again, everyone follow Kevin. Thank you for your time today.
Well, of course. Thank you for having me.
We look forward to watching this come out. Everyone who's following us, again, follow him, follow us. We will stay up to date with it as well. And you're gonna love the story. And we hope to have you back if you decide to write another book.
Well, not only that, but it's become a host year for me, because I feel like I shook the host tree and things fell out. I'll close with, I got cast as the ultimate host, Dick Clark, in the new Michael Jackson movie that's coming out later this year. So he hosted American Bandstand. I hosted Carmen Sandiego. There's a lot of similarities that I found. Awesome. So it's the year of the host.
Perfect. Hey, we're ready to help you channel it. Everyone listening, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, follow them, sign up. You won't be disappointed. Everyone listening, have a good night.